November 1st, 1980, Sacramento, California. 10 p.m. Craig Miller and Mary Elizabeth Sowers are leaving a fraternity party. They're 22 and 21, engaged, happy, walking through the Arden Fair Mall parking lot toward their car, laughing about something. The kind of moment you don't remember because it's so ordinary, because it's just another Saturday night. Then a man steps out of the shadows. He's holding a .25 caliber Beretta. He doesn't say much. He doesn't need to. He points the gun at Craig, points it at Mary, and tells them to get in his car. They get in. What they don't know, what no one standing in that parking lot knows, is that this man has done this before, 9 times before, and that sitting in the passenger seat, watching this happen with the calm of someone watching a familiar movie, is his wife. She smiles. One of Craig's friends watches from across the parking lot. He can't get there in time, but he does one thing right. He writes down the license plate number. That piece of paper will matter, but not in time to save Craig, not in time to save Mary. How do two people, a man and a woman, a couple, people who went grocery shopping and watched TV and argued about money like everyone else, become the most efficient predator duo in American criminal history? How does Charlene Williams, a girl from a stable middle-class family, a girl with a photographic memory and a future, end up in the passenger seat of a van while her husband drags teenagers into the back? And here's the question that haunts this case more than any other. Was she a victim or was she a partner? That question doesn't have a clean answer. And by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why. There is a detail about Gerald Gallego that sets this story apart from every other serial killer narrative. He didn't just inherit violence, he inherited legacy. Gerald Armand Gallego was born in Sacramento, California on July 17, 1946. His father, Gerald Albert Gallego, was not in his life. He was not in anyone's life because he was a criminal who spent his years in and out of prison, fleeing charges and committing increasingly violent crimes. On March 3, 1955, when young Gerald was 8 years old, his father became the first man executed in Mississippi's new gas chamber. The crime, killing 2 police officers. The execution took nearly 20 minutes. His body convulsed in the cyanide cloud while witnesses watched. Gerald's mother told him his father had died in a car accident. He didn't learn the truth until he was 16. And when he did, here is what he told a court-appointed psychologist years later. "I have the feeling that my father is inside of me." His mother was a sex worker. Her clients came to the house. Several of them sexually abused the boy. Her boyfriends beat him. He was often hungry, often dirty, often alone. His only reported friend at age 8 was a puppy named Queenie. He would beg adults to hug him and be turned away. By age 10, Gerald had his first felony arrest for robbing a neighbor's house. By age 12, he had accumulated 5 burglary arrests. By 12, he had been sentenced to a California youth facility for sexually abusing a 6-year-old girl. He was married 7 times, sometimes while still legally married to someone else. He abandoned wives when they ran out of money. He abused them until they left. One of his daughters later came forward to testify that he had sexually abused her for years. By the time Gerald Gallego met Charlene Williams in a Sacramento poker club in September 1977, he was 31 years old, had 23 arrests on his record, and had served time for armed robbery. He was charming, quick-witted. He had a bartender's gift for reading a room, knowing what someone needed to hear, knowing when to be funny and when to be serious. He was also already planning something. Charlene Adele Williams was born on October 19, 1956, 10 years younger than Gerald. Her father was the vice president of a major supermarket chain. Her family was comfortable, stable, respected. Early school reports described her as quiet and diligent. She had a documented photographic memory. By her own account, something shifted in her 20s. She started drinking, started using drugs, had 2 failed marriages before she turned 21, had a daughter from a brief relationship whom she placed for adoption. She walked into that Sacramento poker club looking like someone who had lost her way. Gerald recognized that immediately. Within a week of meeting him, she had moved in. He was magnetic in the way that certain dangerous people are, a gravity that felt like intimacy. He told her she was different, special, that he understood her in a way no one else had. What he actually understood was her need to be needed. The couple married in June 1978, while Gerald was technically still married to another woman. Charlene's parents, who had initially been wary, eventually came to support the relationship. They would later help Gerald obtain fake identification so he could find employment under an alias. They wired money to the couple when they were on the run. Some people recognized danger too late. A year into their relationship, the marriage had settled into an arrangement that investigators and psychologists would later describe as deeply controlling. Gerald was sexually disinterested in Charlene. He told her plainly that he needed something she couldn't provide alone. He said he needed love slaves, and he asked her to get them. What happened next? Whether Charlene agreed out of fear, desire, or some mixture of both is the question that would consume the trial and everything that came after it. But here's what we know for certain. She said yes, she got in the van, and on September 10, 1978, she walked into a Sacramento shopping mall alone, spotted two teenage girls, and invited them to smoke marijuana in her van. She smiled the whole time, and that was the beginning. September 10, 1978, Sacramento's Country Club Plaza Mall. Rhonda Scheffler was 17. Kippy Vaught was 16. They were at the mall, doing what teenage girls do on a Saturday. Charlene approached them. She was 21, attractive, friendly, not threatening in any way. She offered them marijuana, said she had more in her van nearby. They followed her. In the back of the van, Gerald was waiting. He restrained them at gunpoint. They drove through the night to a remote area near Baxter. Gerald raped the girls repeatedly. As dawn came, he ordered Charlene to stay in the car, turn up the radio, and not look. He took the girls across a field to a ditch. He struck Kippy with a tire iron, then swung at Rhonda, then pulled out his pistol. Kippy tried to run after the first shot. It had only grazed her skull. Gerald went back and fired 3 more times, then fired again at both bodies because they were, in his words, still wiggling. Charlene said afterward that she heard the radio, that she didn't look. Nobody was looking for a couple. Police suspected the murders were tied to Kippy's father, who had been slated as a witness against a heroin dealer. The investigation went nowhere near a van, nowhere near Gerald Gallego, nowhere near the woman with the friendly smile. They were invisible, and invisibility made them bold. June 24, 1979, the Washoe County Fair, Reno, Nevada. This time Brenda Judd, 14, and Sandra Colley, 13. Charlene found them at the fair. Same approach, same smile. She offered them money to help distribute flyers. They followed her to the van. Gerald abused both girls for hours in a remote area called Humboldt Sink. At one point, while Gerald slept, Charlene forced the girls at gunpoint to perform sex acts on each other. Later, he murdered them with a shovel. Their bodies weren't found for 20 years. Police listed them as runaways. April 24, 1980, Sacramento. Karen Chipman Twiggs and Stacy Redican, both 17, both abducted from a mall parking lot. Gerald drove them into the Nevada desert while Charlene sat in front. He took one girl out at a time into the distance, returning alone with a hammer and a shovel. June 7, 1980, Oregon. They were honeymooning. Gerald had recently married Charlene under an alias, Stephen File, to escape charges related to his daughter's abuse. 6 days into the honeymoon, they picked up a hitchhiker on the highway. Linda Aguilar was 21 years old and visibly pregnant. Gerald raped her, then strangled her, then bludgeoned her with a rock, then buried her. Sand found in her lungs during the autopsy would later confirm that she had been buried alive. July 17, 1980, West Sacramento. Virginia Marshall was a bartender, 34 years old. She was abducted from the parking lot of the bar where she worked after her shift. Her skeletal remains, bound with nylon fishing line, loops of cord still around her neck, were found 3 months later outside Clarksburg. 10 victims, 2 years, 3 states, and a smile that never stopped working. There are 2 ways to read Charlene Gallego. The first is the version she told and kept telling for the rest of her life, that she was a victim, coerced by a violent and manipulative man, too afraid to refuse, too broken to escape. That she tried to save some of the girls by telling them to comply, that her presence in that van was the result of fear and not choice. The second is what the evidence shows. She approached the victims alone. She spoke to them first. She gained their trust. She established rapport. She was the one who got them into the van, not Gerald, who waited in the back with a gun. Without Charlene, Gerald Gallego could not have done this. He was not charming in the way required to lure a teenage girl to a van. He looked, to someone paying attention, like exactly what he was. Charlene looked like a friend. There is also the detail, confirmed by Charlene's own testimony, that during the kidnapping of Brenda Judd and Sandra Colley, after Gerald fell asleep, Charlene did not try to free the girls. She did not run for help. She did not look away. She forced them to perform sex acts on each other at gunpoint. The question of who Charlene really was may never have a clean answer, but the question of what she did has one. She did it willingly enough for long enough across enough victims that 10 people are dead. As the crimes continued, something else was happening. Their system was tightening. Gerald became more organized. Charlene became more embedded. They had aliases. They had routines. They were, in every functional sense, a criminal enterprise, and they had gotten away with it 9 times. What they hadn't counted on was an engaged couple leaving a fraternity party and a friend with good eyes. November 1st, 1980, Arden Fair Mall, Sacramento. 10 p.m. Craig Miller and Mary Elizabeth Sowers were leaving together. They were 22 and 21. They were engaged. Their friends were nearby. Gerald stepped out with the gun. He was visible this time, in a lit parking lot, with witnesses around. This was not Humboldt Sink or a remote Oregon highway. This was a mall. His friend, someone who knew Craig, watched from across the parking lot and memorized the license plate of the car. He called police immediately. Gerald drove Craig to an isolated area. He ordered him out of the car and shot him in the back of the head. Then he brought Mary back to the apartment. He and Charlene kept her there through the night, then drove her to a field in Placer County and shot her 3 times. She was still wearing the same dress she had on at the party. Her body was found in a trench near Loomis 3 weeks later, still bound. The license plate connected to a car registered to Charlene. The investigation moved fast. The Gallegos fled. They changed names, contacted Charlene's parents, who wired $500 to Omaha, Nebraska. Authorities tracked the wire transfer. On November 17, 1980, 16 days after Craig and Mary were abducted, FBI agents were waiting at the Western Union office in Omaha when Charlene walked in to collect the money. Gerald was outside in the car. They were both arrested. Gerald verbally insulted the agents and complained his handcuffs were too tight. Charlene began crying. At the arraignment, Gerald stood up in court and shouted at reporters, "We're not animals. What happened to a fair trial?" Charlene shouted, "Why are you doing this to us?" She was pregnant with Gerald's child. She gave birth behind bars on January 18, 1981. And then in July 1982, after months of silence, after watching the evidence stack against her, after understanding exactly what was coming, Charlene made a decision. She would talk. The deal that Charlene negotiated is one of the most controversial plea agreements in American criminal history. In exchange for testifying against Gerald, providing full accounts of all 10 murders, leading investigators to remains they didn't know existed, confirming details only someone present could know, Charlene would receive a sentence of 16 years and 8 months. Not for 10 murders, not for the Oregon hitchhiker buried alive, not for the 13-year-old at the county fair, not for Craig Miller or Mary Elizabeth Sowers or Virginia Mockle. 16 years and 8 months. She was the most valuable witness prosecutors had. Without her testimony, the physical evidence alone might not have been enough. She knew where the bodies were. She knew the exact sequence. She knew things about the crimes that only a participant could know, and she told them everything. Gerald went to trial in California first and chose to represent himself. It was a disaster. The jury took less than 2 hours to recommend death. He was extradited to Nevada, tried again, convicted again. Another death sentence. 2 death sentences, 1 man. He never showed remorse. He insisted to the end that the crimes were Charlene's idea. Charlene served her sentence in Nevada. She studied psychology, business, and Icelandic literature. She reportedly used her photographic memory to master the prison library. She was released on July 17, 1997, exactly 16 years and 8 months after her sentence began. She changed her name. She returned to Sacramento. She started working in charity, later claiming she dedicated her life to giving back. In 2002, Gerald Gallego died of colorectal cancer at Ely State Prison in Nevada. He had refused treatment, opting only for sedation. He died one day after his 56th birthday, the same age range as the victims he had killed. He was buried in a prison cemetery. He never faced execution. He never answered for all 10 murders. Neither did Charlene. The families of the victims watched Charlene walk free and return to the same city where she had smiled at their children and led them into a van. Hal Sowers, whose daughter Mary Elizabeth was the last victim, said it simply, She always had a smile. She's with us every day. There is one detail from this case that I cannot stop thinking about. When Charlene was interviewed years after her release, living under a new name, doing charity work, trying to build a new life, a reporter asked her about the murders. She said, "I see it every day. I always see it. It never goes away. There isn't one more than the other. They're all horrible, horrible memories, every single one." And maybe that's true. But Brenda Judd was 14 when Charlene pointed a gun at her in the dark and told her what to do. Sandra Colley was 13, and they had followed Charlene willingly because a young woman with a friendly smile had asked if they wanted to help distribute flyers. They said yes, they trusted her. That trust is what killed them. Not Gerald's strength, not Gerald's gun, not Gerald's rage, Charlene's smile. The Gallego case broke something in criminology, a comfortable assumption about how serial killers work. We assume monsters act alone. We assume they look a certain way, move a certain way, set off certain alarms. We assume you can feel danger approaching. Charlene destroyed that assumption. She looked like safety. She looked like a peer, a friend, someone your age who wanted to hang out. She made the van feel like the right choice, and she did it 10 times. The question this case leaves open, the one that has no satisfying answer, is not whether Gerald was a monster. He clearly was. The question is what to call someone who understood exactly what was happening, who knew where the bodies were, who returned from each crime and went back to the next one, and who, when it was over, negotiated her way out of prison in 16 years and returned to the city where it all happened. Was she a victim, a survivor, a partner, a predator who wore a better mask than Gerald ever could? Charlene is still alive. She is in her late 60s. She lives in California under a different name. She knows where every body is. But the question of what makes someone like Charlene possible, the psychology, the specific conditions that turn someone who grew up in a stable home into the most effective accomplice in American serial killing history, is a story that goes much deeper than this case. And it starts with a question forensic psychologists still can't answer.